This is my ASUS K53-E laptop. Now, this was purchased back in August of 2011, so just at 5 years ago, to serve as my primary portable computer. I didn't have a decent laptop at the time. I had my netbook, but that thing's terrible. So I wanted a decent machine on par with my current desktop at the time to take out and do stuff with. And I bought this because the ASUS brand, I like their, motherboards and the like, their parts, the everything seemed good. And the specifications were nice. 2 gigahertz dual core processor, 4 gigs of RAM, which I upgraded to 8, 64-bit. It was a good machine, spec-wise. The thing is, though, the machine, honestly, not that good. The inbuilt programs for the more proprietary hardware on it, they don't work quite right. Right now it's working fine, and there it goes, locking up after too many commands being sent, so to speak. It had a flaw where if you didn't have a DVD in the optical drive, it would not resume from hibernate correctly, and I prefer to hibernate my machines, especially laptops, when I go out and about. So that was quite an annoyance till I discovered if you kept a disk in there, it would resume properly rather than lock up. And the machine just, once it got going, if you got into something, it would go alright, but it just did not behave properly like that. It's just now responding to the commands. So it was really, really kind of a pain to use, and I thought upgrading to Windows 8 would make it better. That didn't help. Windows 10 still hasn't helped. And early on in its life, I relegated it to being a media PC. I actually didn't use it for over a year till I moved into this house, and that's when I hooked it up to the TV and just used it for media, which it did pretty well. It still had a few quirks, but it served its role. Part of the reason I stopped using it was the fact that it actually suffered a very, very bad hit on some concrete. You can't quite see that. There you go. What had happened is it had fallen with the laptop bag itself. The bag was pretty poorly designed, and it snaps unclipped, and it fell about 3 feet right on the concrete in the bag, and it hit on this corner. So it has dead pixels, the screen hasn't worked right. It was powered off at the time, of course. It was in the bag, so the hard disk was fine, but it hadn't behaved right since, and you don't want to take out a laptop or something that has a bunch of dead pixels. It's just irritating to use. So, as I was saying, Windows and this machine just don't seem to get along. And with Windows 10 doing the constant updating it does, the hard disk is just getting slammed. This machine has always had this weird tendency to just seem to have the worst time seeking on the hard disk. Now, when it wants to run, it runs fine and it acts normal, but that's rare that it wants to behave right. Most of the time, it seems to be seeking nonstop. When I'm going to bed and I want to queue up a YouTube video, I want to have quick, instant reaction. I want it to go to the video, start playing it, not fight me for it. If I want to run a video, I don't want to have 12 different, media apps to load up. Windows 10 is overkill for this. And I could go back to Windows 7, but then I would still have the same problems. I would still have these crazy media managers not acting right, and it acting funny with the TV. So, why not install Linux? Now, what I don't want to do is get rid of a good Windows license, and this machine has a valid Windows 7, factory install that I can restore from. It has this Windows 10 license active on it. It could still serve a role in the future. I could find a way to clean it up and get proper software to where it wants to behave snippy for Windows. That's unlikely, but I don't want to toss away a valid license. So I do have a spare 160 gigabyte hard disk, and I have a Ubuntu Linux install flash drive made. So what I'm thinking about doing is installing this hard drive, installing Linux, and using it as a Linux-based media PC. All it does is stay hooked up to a TV anyway. I switch to HDMI 3 and fire it up, and that's that. So, let's do it. On the K53-E, getting the backplate off is easy. It's just a 2-screw assembly, and that gives you access to the RAM and to the hard drive bay. That's held with 4 screws, the little caddy for it, and then just slides over, and the hard disk comes out. Like I said, this has a Western Digital 320 gig hard disk. The one I'm going to put in is an 160 gig Seagate. But That'll do fine. There's a lot of media on this one that I don't watch, and it is backed up, so that's no big. I'll just throw fewer movies or series or something on here, and only really throw on things that I plan on watching or having play as I head to sleep, and it should be fine. Mount it in the caddy and install Linux. Looks like it's its normal, yeah, your normal 4-screw assembly on the caddy. So I'll mount that in and should be smooth. And the replacement hard drive is in. Getting it out of there is actually kind of a pain, but I'll go on and take this one and store it somewhere, and if I ever feel like getting back to Windows and messing around, I'll, give it a shot. Now you may wonder, some of you will think, well, won't it have the same problems under Linux? The Linux kernel has a hell of a lot better hardware support than the Windows kernel does. Microsoft tends to work with the bigger hardware producers. IBM, back when they produced hardware, they sold off to Lenovo, I believe. And HP especially, which is actually why all my store-bought machines are HP/Compaq. Just the inbuilt support from Microsoft is just, it's nice to have. I like it to just work. I don't like extra third-party shit being necessary, crazy extra drivers. I don't even like the fact that we have to have graphics card drivers, but that's an inevitability. I mean, they can manage to streamline code and make the processor run better that way, so that I can live with, as annoying as it is. But the idea here is that the machine just needs to do its job. It just needs to be there, booted, ready to go when I want to watch a film or load up YouTube or just browse from my bed. And Linux will definitely let me do that. And Xubuntu, being as lightweight as it is, it requires like 256 megs of RAM or so, and is a really streamlined OS. It'll do the job nicely. I don't need any frills. I don't need constant weather in my Twitter feed and constant email updates. That isn't what this computer is for. That's what my desktop and my other laptop are for. So, if you were wondering, that's why I'm going Linux, aside from the fact that it's the obvious choice when Windows isn't going to work out on this thing. Geez, the screws for the hard drive caddy did not want to go back in there. I think I may have partially stripped one of them. It'll come back out, but the one or two of them on this end are definitely roughed up, so whatever. I probably will never actually get around to doing the Windows replacement, but in the event I do, then it's there. I think I actually have the physical backup disks for this laptop, so in the worst case scenario where I desperately need to go back to Windows 7 on this thing, I don't see why that would happen, I can use those disks. I'll double check before I format this, make sure they're valid anyway. The hard drive is in. I'm going to presume it's functional. I think it has a Linux install on it right now, so I will probably just see if that boots up, and if it does, I'll just see how it wants to behave, maybe do kind of a dry test. It'll be weird, but you can actually sometimes take a Linux install and port it to another piece of hardware, and it'll sort of fix itself up. It'll be like, oh, this is different, this is different, this is different, but I recognize it. So that might be a fun little experiment. I'll try it out. So booting from the hard disk was an absolute joke. It apparently has a Windows install on it that obviously blue screens the moment it tries to boot on this machine, because this isn't the hardware it's installed for. But Xubuntu booted fast as hell off the flash drive and behaves pretty snappy to the commands for brightness and volume. So the only thing now is to actually click the install Xubuntu icon and, well, install. If you look, you can see one of the dead pixels right there, two of them. Oh, went out of focus. And there's more up there. Some of this is obviously crud and smudges on the screen, but other things are clearly dead pixels that I can see from here. So when I talked about the thing falling and getting damaged, that's really noticeable damage. But let's see how quickly it wants to install. Or at least try to. This is pretty snappy. Install third-party software, definitely. If you've never seen a Linux install, this is how it goes, at least in the Ubuntu derivatives. Again, I like Xubuntu because of the absolute minimal system resources it takes. I also like Lubuntu. Uses, oh god, I forget the desktop manager that it uses, but it's a nice, god, Windows Server 2008, are you serious? This must have been the hard drive I was messing around with about 2 years ago in that noisy server. That's crazy. Use logical volume management. Why not? Erase the disk and install Xubuntu. I don't give a shit. What was I going to say? Lubuntu, for some reason, didn't want to boot right on my netbook when I was going to give it another test, the 16.4 install. So I went with upgrading to 16.4 on Xubuntu, which I had been using on the netbook. Yeah, continue. Make those changes. The system resources for Lubuntu are even less than for Xubuntu, and you know the interface is slightly better, but in the end they're basically the same. And long story short, Xubuntu had gotten kind of clunky on my netbook since I had wanted to install the, what do you call them, the universe repositories, the random software. I wanted to check that, and everything just got weird, so I'm sticking to more mainstream software and also using long-term support release, because I don't care about being on the cutting edge with Linux anymore. I just use it as an aside when I feel like it. So it's no big deal. Let's click Central. Yeah, Chicago. We'll go with that. Jeez, how many OS install videos are there out there on the internet? There's got to be hundreds of thousands. And this is the part where I need both hands and I fill out sensitive information, so I'll get back to you once the install is complete. So, where was I? I think I was just talking about Xubuntu. I don't have a problem with the core Ubuntu distribution. It's just, it's very, very system resource intensive, and since my main Linux machine up until doing this has been my old 2008 netbook, which I really need to do a video on, I wanted something that's as streamlined as possible. Now, my favorite time for Linux was actually around 2010. The October 1010 release of Ubuntu is what it was. It was right before they switched to the Unity interface. They had the Ubuntu font, which I love, and everything was just, it was perfect. And I wish that was a long-term support release. Granted, it would no longer be supported today. It still would be just awesome to use. That was so perfect. I liked the GNOME 3. GNOME 3? Was it GNOME? No, the GNOME 2 base. GNOME 3 is the GNOME shell that Unity is similar to but different from. I can't even remember. Linux is, and the GNU software utilities. GNU software, GNU. I want to pronounce that one with the G in that one, but I don't want to pronounce it in GNOME and other GNU software, so I don't know. What I'm getting at is all the naming conventions are just so crazy. It's hard to keep up with when you're kind of a casual diving in and out of Linux. But I do enjoy the OS. It is very, very usable, especially for certain task-oriented things. Imagine if Mac OS wasn't as matured as it was, and you have the feel of Linux. It's really kind of a cool thing to use, just because it's a little off. And I'm just sitting here filming a screen and talking. It is at least going. Or it's trying to. I never connected it to the network. Bluetooth is supported, which is good. Not that I'm going to be doing any Bluetooth stuff. Although I do have a Bluetooth adapter I could get. Well, I don't need the adapter. I could get a Bluetooth keyboard and use that. I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud to fill the time and make a video that some people may or may not find interesting. You know, it has to be said, and I don't know how accurate this may really be, but even in Windows, this thing said 3 to 4 hours of battery life. It's probably more around 2, and this is a 5-year-old battery, but that's still some impressive freaking battery life. Not that I'm using it on battery, it's going to stay on main power, but still. And yes, it's still installing stuff. That's okay though. I think part of it's the limitations of a USB 2 transfer speed. And there we go. I'm now finished installing Ubuntu. Let's go on and restart. I don't know how well you can hear that over the natural noise the camera makes, but that hard drive is clicking away. Oh, Wi-Fi enabled. We still got nothing on the screen, but it's coming. It's coming. There we go. There we go. Come on, you. Usually the first boot is the worst, and like I said, I'll be, well, ooh, that's gonna be an annoyance. Like I said, I like to hibernate my machines. You have to go through a, oh, it's doing file system check. I'll let it do that just to test out this hard drive. Well, it took longer than I would have liked for it to boot up, but it did boot successfully. Hard drive's a little slow, a little clunky, but it's at least functional. I mean, this is running snippy. Let's put it through the other test. Still controls just fine. I'm going to cram that up. Now, the real test is going to be it getting hooked up to the TV, because that's what it's used for. I don't use it like this. This was just to film the video. So we'll get it hooked up to the TV and see how it wants to behave. So there's the laptop hanging out, and here it is using the TV as the main display. This is a 30-something inch TV. I forget how big. Here's an Xbox One game case for comparison. So it's a little bit of a tiny view. That's alright though. Once I get a video going, I'll just maximize the window and let it do its thing. This should work fine. There were some issues trying to do like I did in Windows, where I cloned the display. It doesn't want to output the exact aspect ratio that it needs to the TV, so everything would be a little bit stretched out sideways. If I switch to a 720 type of resolution, which I usually used, even though the TV is a full 1080, so I can use this. I can probably up the font sizes and everything to compensate for it, so this actually should go fine. Now to hook it up to the Wi-Fi, let it install updates, and get my Firefox data transferred over. That's going to be the key thing. Not that I can't log into everything myself, but I like to have everything synchronized. It's really convenient when I'm working on something or reading several blogs or something to just load up the same windows from the other computer and continue where I left off. Cool. So I discovered a slight problem. Whenever the video feed is cut to the TV, like if the TV shuts off, the laptop detects this and goes back to displaying its video feed through its screen. And whenever the TV is turned back on, you can set it to automatically detect that there's a new display, but it won't actually show the video feed until you tell it that you need to display this way. I'm going to see if there's a way to make the setting permanent, but this is just one of those nuances of Linux where some things, they just behave differently and you've got to get used to them. I wouldn't call this a wrong behavior. This is arguably more correct than Windows implementation of staying, off even though the TV is dead, as far as it's concerned with HDMI, but still, that's just not the way I want to do it. I could mirror the displays, but like I said, this doesn't want to play right with the TV, so I'm going to keep working at it and figure this out. So it's maybe 30 minutes later or so. I spent about 10 or 20 minutes trying to see if I could turn off the laptop display and hardware, and I can't seem to get that disabled. I kind of want to see if maybe there's a way in the Linux install itself, kind of like in Windows, to just disable something. If I can disable the hardware that way, that might work. Sort of a device manager app. I'm sure there is one. But after rebooting, the system behaves kind of funny, but it came back to the TV properly and not the laptop. So this should work, and again, if I get Hibernate enabled, it'll probably go alright. Well, I just discovered a big problem with this entire thing. I'm on my own YouTube channel and I'm playing the channel trailer where the audio comes from a rather unexpected source. don't think you can hear it because I down mixed to mono, but the quality certainly shows. It's actually coming out of the laptop speakers rather than the TV. So that's something. Can I change that up here? Let's find out. Let's do it live. God, I'm so used to Windows. Sound settings. This should be good. And, what? Okay, here we go. Output devices. Headphones unplugged. What? Advanced. All output devices. Output devices. Configuration. There we go. HDMI output. Output devices. So, there we go. Okay, so that's fixed. I don't know how often I'll have to be fixing that. This may be a very, very, very common thing I'll have to do. I hope it won't be. Hopefully maybe it'll stick, and even when the laptop turns off, or the TV turns off, the laptop will not go into playing audio through its own thing, because that would kind of suck. You know what? I might as well go on and simulate it and see what happens. So I gave it a shot, and I can get it to go silent once the TV goes off. But what I can't get it to do is come back with the audio coming through the TV like it should. So this is... yeah, I got another subscriber. Cool. So this is one of those things that's just... it's gonna be a pain. Like I said, ideally, with me having this set up the way it should stay, it shouldn't be an issue. I may honestly have to go back to Windows 7, and I really don't want to do that. But at this rate, it just doesn't seem like Linux is actually going to do it, and that's a real bummer. Because this really should be, you know, the best way to do this. I mean, I'm sure on some Linux systems it will, but for this laptop setup, it always wants to fall back to the home machine. When I had Windows on that machine, on the other hard drive, and I did this, it reacted, it just stayed constant. So, I think I might just go on and put the old hard disk back in. Going to nuke all of the little software tools that are on there, and we're just gonna see how this bastard wants to behave. Me and this laptop have not gotten along, but I paid good damn money for it. I'm gonna make use of it till the thing doesn't work at all, because I'm a stubborn ass and it ain't worth selling in the condition it's in. Let's do this. So we're back on Windows, and I just wanted to note how it's still slamming the hard drive. I don't get it. I mean, it's got to relate to Windows Update to some degree, and I'm not getting the out-of-memory messages that I used to. So you know, it's wanting to install updates, and I don't know. This is just so annoying. What's using up all the hard disks access anyway? Let's find out. Anti-malware service executable. Windows Defender service. Why don't we just kill those? Windows probably won't like it. Yep, Windows did not like that attempt. So this is the thing. It slams the hard disk, but... after redoing all this, it is running, well, I wouldn't call it running a little better, but it is acting more, more snappy, I'd say. So maybe this will work out okay in the end. Which would also mean I have completely wasted several hours of the day. And that this whole video has been completely pointless. But... it was an interesting little attempt at seeing what I can do. Seeing if a Linux distro will work fine for this kind of usage. And sadly, it looks like an Ubuntu-based distro will not work out okay. But I'm going to keep on messing around and see how this behaves. I'll get back to you. So I've gone and pretty much cleaned up everything that I need to on the system itself. I've disabled all the startup tools. For some reason, the taskbar pointing device thing still triggers, but whatever. I still need to do that Java update. But yeah, everything actually seems to be running perfectly fine. I I don't know. I mean, I guess in the end I should have just stripped out everything and tried to get the Windows install as streamlined as possible, because it still boots a little rough, but I let the updates install, rebooted from that, and everything seems to be running fine. So I'm going to leave it just setting for a while and see how it bakes in. Then I'll try to run a video and see if it has that sound problem that it had before. Otherwise, though, everything's fine. So I should have just done this sooner. Anyway, it's almost 10. This vlog is done. Thanks for watching. I'm sure this is a long video, way longer than it needs to be. Leave a comment down below. Be sure to give it a like. If you somehow watch this and aren't subscribed, be sure to do that. You'll probably enjoy some of the other junk I come up with. That's all. Thanks for watching. I'll catch everyone next time.